What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk a little bit about Redfall. I know, a game that really not many people ever talk about, and I think kind of for a good reason, but this is important, and this is something that, me being the game preservation guy that I've kind of morphed into the last couple of years, I really feel like it's important, and I feel like a lot of people would kind of just let this go, and we're here to talk about it. I actually did something very, very similar for Suicide Squad, and I actually think these games, sadly, have a lot of comparables. And so, what are we here to talk about? There was a rumor, I'm recording this on Wednesday, you guys are seeing it later. There's a rumor that this month was supposed to actually be the month that Redfall was going to get an offline mode. And I also think, like, additional stuff, they were still updating the game. Now, really, it stops there. Let me just say something. I don't care about the updates that they've been doing. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I've been rooting for this game to make, I want games to be good. I guess, want games to have redemption stories. This game is what I would consider a bad game. But I would say this, and this is the same thing I said for Suicide Squad. Preservation is important, and what we've seen with this Xbox thing, this is actually a slight different situation than Suicide Squad. Suicide Squad promised the offline mode. We're sitting here a few months in. We haven't gotten it yet. You never know when WB might just decide to walk in one day to Rocksteady and say, you're done. We know you promised things. We know that you have other seasons in the works, but you're done. You're not going to be allowed to do it. You're moving on to something else, or we're closing you, or we're laying people off. Anything. You never know what could happen. So that was that situation. And this one, again, in some ways kind of similar. They don't have the opportunity to do something that should have been done, I would argue, immediately, right when the game comes out. It's actually, I got to be real, I didn't even know this was a thing. I think we probably reported back when, because I made a few videos on Redfall. I assume we talked about when it was coming out that it was only going to be online, right? Even if you play it single player, which you can do, you'd have to connect to the internet. And I think what I never really paid too much attention to was, well, was there any plan, or like, were they going to implement that down the road where they took that requirement away? Now, the difference between Suicide Squad and this, as we know, as we've been talking about all week, Xbox shuts the team down. So this is a much worse situation where they will not have the opportunity to do it. And let me just be, maybe not the first one to declare it, but let me just declare it here, early May 2024, Redfall's gonna die. And this is the part where you can throw in the jokes about how terrible of a game it is, right? And that's fine. Like, you can make as many jokes. You can talk about I have no issue with that. I'm not gonna censor anybody in the comments or anything like that. But honestly, what I argued with Suicide Squad, I would argue here as well, in terms of that preservation angle, and something that I very much believe in very strongly, right? I could care less if the game is complete garbage or if the game is a 10 out of 10 game of the year. The games need to be preserved. And this is the problem with these always online games, is you never know, as I just keep saying, you never know what can happen to them, right? You let Redfall go an entire year, and you never did this. And so, eventually you might assume, well, they're just going to be forced off the project. They might never be able to implement it. Maybe some thought that they'd be shut down, although, as people have pointed out even this past week, there were comments from the higher-ups at Xbox that said, no, this studio is not in any danger of shutting down. They weren't happy with Redfall, but they never gave any indication. In fact, they gave the opposite indication that the studio was going to be okay, right? But again, you never know when they could just come in and pull the plug, and this is why I think it's so important that we get these things immediately. I know it's easier to argue, and again, the whole jokes of like the quality, I know it's easier to argue when a game is good, right? When a game is good, it's, I want to have my kids be able to play this, right, in 20 years. I want to be able to play this in 20 years, right? And I understand that. Like, there's a lot of games that, as we continue to get older here, like even me with the PS3 era that I always talk so much about, those games are 15 plus years old. Like, they're actually getting up there 5, 10 years, 20 years, 25 years it's been since these games come out. That's wild. And I want to still be able to enjoy these games. So again, hence why preservation is so important. Well, one day that happens with all games, right? And again, like, it's easier to argue, okay, well, the games that really like did something to you as a child, right? Like, really impacted your life or that left a mark, and it's such a good game. But if you're, I guess my belief in it is, if you're going to do it for one, you do it for all. Like, games as a whole should be preserved. And I've always thrown around, I'm sure there's other games you can throw around, but like a Naughty Bear, that was always a classic one, because that's when I started getting into IGN and listening to like Podcast Beyond and stuff. I remember like the Naughty Bear saga leading up to the release. and just how god awful of a game. I actually, I gotta be real, like I've never actually played that game, but I watched so much footage on it. I guess I can't speak on my own experience playing it, but I feel as if that game, at least watching it, was pretty garbage. But I always use that as a just a thing to bring up, an experience, because that's just a classic game that I remember being so bad, but I still want it around, right? Because like you can still learn from stuff like that. Maybe you can play it one day. Hey, maybe some games age better. That's the whole, I have a podcast now, Back to the Past, right? I play loads of old games, and even right now as I'm recording this, I've been playing Watch Dogs 2014, 10 years old. I actually didn't like that game when it came out, and right now I'm loving it. I think it's actually a blast. Things can change. Now, sometimes bad games are just bad games, right? But the idea is you keep them around, so that maybe 5, 10, 15 years down the line, you can show it off, or maybe you can criticize it, maybe you can make fun of it. It doesn't really matter what you're doing with it. The fact is it's still around, right? And again, I always bring up Naughty Bear. I'm sure there's dozens, if not hundreds of games, PS2 and Xbox era, even going backwards, even before that in the 90s. I mean, you can think of like E.T. when they buried it, right? Like sometimes maybe there's too many of these games around, or too many copies of these games, but it's important to keep these games, even the bad ones. And for something like Redfall, it's just another example of why you need to do it, I would argue, as quickly as possible, right? In fact, I gotta be real, seeing this Redfall thing and even talking about it makes me even more nervous for Suicide Squad Kill a Justice League, because we just I talked about it, I think, maybe last weekend, we just did this, where it's like, you don't do it 2-3 months in. Well, look at Redfall. They didn't do it a year in. And when were they going to do it? Well, rumor is this month, but okay, well, a year in, and that you got shut down. So if you would have done it 1 month earlier, you would have been safe. The game would have been safe, but you didn't do it. And now, not to be too doomsday, again, I've said this in past videos, like I don't like to jump to the absolute worst thing, but to be honest with you, I feel very confident in saying Redfall is a goner. In 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it is, I can almost guarantee, you can't fully guarantee, but I can almost guarantee, Redfall will just be shut down. They will turn the servers off, and you will not be able to play this game. Again, that's where the jokes of like, well, who wants to play this game? I understand that. I don't really want to play Redfall, and I have no plans to play Redfall over the next little while. But you know what? You don't really know what you got until it's gone, right? So like when Redfall 3 years from now gets pulled off, maybe there's some people that say, hey, I kind of wanted to play it now, you know what I mean? And now it's gone. We've even seen this in real time. We saw this back in, like a couple months ago, maybe like 2 months ago with The Crew. The Crew, which I don't think is like an amazing game. I mean, I'm not into like racing games, but The Crew, I believe that came out in like 2013, 2014. The game's gone. Like they pulled it offline. In fact, they even started removing it from people's like libraries. So like even if you bought the game, you saw the icon. Well, number one, if you click it to actually play the game, you can't actually play it, right? Like it's literally, it will not work. I actually have it physically. And number two, they're even now removing it from the store itself, or the library itself. So even though you own it, you don't even get the satisfaction or whatever of actually owning it anymore. They feel like they can just come in and remove it. So it's not like these things don't happen for those that like, oh, Alec, it'll never happen. Like, I don't believe it. No. It happens all the time. And you're seeing it now in real time, that I can, again, get this close to promising you that Redfall is going to happen. Who will miss it when it's gone? Fair point. But at the same time, again, it's about, I guess, it's about the idea. It's about the idea of preservation. And doesn't matter if it's a terrible game, doesn't matter if it's a good game. This is why you need to have those offline modes built in. So whether it's Suicide Squad or this or anything, it could even be like a multiplayer, or like a Marvel Rivals, right, which is coming out soon, right? That game will, I assume, always be online. That game will one day not be playable. And I don't know how we like let them get away with it. Clearly we have, though. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.